So what was the fear about then, if there was fear?
I think it's just the unknown. I would say, particularly early on, the fear was, I think, smaller. There was less responsibility, there was less gravity. When you're running a business or running big teams, and there's people and their livelihoods depending on it. Yes, then there's a sense of gravity to the decisions, but you can only make these decisions as best as you can and with thought and care. I think there's a big difference between risk and measuring that risk and being reckless. And so as long as you can say with certainty you have done everything in your power to be careful and considerate and thoughtful, at some point you just have to make that decision and go for it.
Welcome to Risk and Rise, the podcast where we explore the journey of overcoming the fear of failure, embracing risk, and achieving success in entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you. Together we'll discover the strategies, insights, and shifts in our thinking and attitudes that are needed to turn setbacks into stepping stones and transform fear into fuel for success. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into today's episode of Risk and Rise. So what is it like to be an intrapreneur inside of a corporate environment? Today we're going to be risking and rising with Craig Lubbe, who is the head of the marketplace at the Bob Group, and just hear about his journey and how he, within the corporate environment, has tackled his own challenges with failures and making mistakes and the fears of taking on new roles and more responsibilities. Welcome, Craig. And to get our conversation going today, what comes to mind when you hear the term risk and rise?
Sure. I would think of rising up every morning, getting out of bed, waking up with a purpose, and to do that you have to risk something. And so I think that's I guess maybe a bit of a picture pointing to showing up, making sure that you show up every day and present and contribute. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know from knowing you over the last couple of years through what was Bit or Buy and now is Bob Shop, you do show up every day, and maybe you can just tell us a bit about that story of how you got to be where you are now as the director of the Bob Group, or one of the directors, I should say.
Yeah, it was actually a bit of a moment of reflection for me as well, just thinking about it. If I go back to when I was studying, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do one day. And so my background is in microbiology, which is just totally unrelated to where I've ended up. And I still remember being, I think it was a Christmas Eve. I was I think, finished my honors already, and I was busy preparing food for moths in a lab because we had to do some experiments and do some things with them. And I was making sure that this lovely moth population would stay alive, and I was cooking food for them. And I thought, I can't do this with my life. It's Christmas Eve. I should be home. I shouldn't be in a lab here. And just realizing this wasn't for me. And I ended up going to business school after that. And one of the, I think, interesting things there was that I think they convinced me in that year that I could probably do almost anything. That you weren't necessarily going to come out of university and you're a biologist or you're a scientist or this or that. You can actually apply these skills to other areas. And it just so happened that during that year, this advert came up about this place called Bit or Buy. And I knew about the brand. I mean, this was, trying to think, 2008, 2009. And so internet, majority of people were still on dial-up. I was very interested in technology, and I had created websites just out of interest, not because of anything I had been studying. And I thought, wow, this is like living the dream. Go to a place where people are online and that you can buy and sell things. Even that was, I still think, still not mainstream at the time. And so I ended up at Biddelby as an intern, and I think one of the first essentially category managers of or an intern category manager in this company. And so we were tasked with looking at different categories within this large marketplace, or what was a large marketplace at the time. And so all of a sudden we're busy dreaming, oh, I'm interested in photography. Maybe I should try and develop that category, or it's fashion. So there were three of us, and we essentially got thrown into the deep end. I think none of us were experts. That was, I think, it's been one of the beauties, I think, throughout my time at Biddelby and now in Bob's shop, is that in many cases, what we end up doing, we aren't experts in the field. In fact, we know absolutely nothing about what we're doing. And so we get exposed, during the course of this time, over the years, we were being exposed to all these new things. Next thing, you're doing online marketing, or you're trying to develop business, and you're trying to help small businesses get their online presence sort of known, and through your marketplace. So anyway, I ended up in this category space, and then one day we started developing apps. And at the time, it was very different to where it is now. There was iOS for Apple and Android apps, but then there was BlackBerry and Windows Phone apps. And I really took a liking to this. And so before I officially moved into a role that kind of looked at that more specifically, I was still involved in the category team, but looking at our apps from a product point of view, not necessarily from a technical point of view. And so it kind of just naturally morphed into this place where I was looking at mobile products. And again, absolutely didn't know what I was doing, but definitely learning. So having this attitude of learning, I think, is something that's been, I think, instrumental and necessary in a company such as Bob Group or Biddelby at the time. And then one day, it was, I think I had been at the company about 5.5 years, and I got this call out the blue about this opportunity to leave Biddelby. And for me, this was quite something, because I think I was this microbiologist who had ended up at an internet marketplace company. I think we'd call ourselves a tech company at the time. I think marketplaces weren't even mainstream yet. The word marketplace wasn't well understood as opposed to now. And I think at that point I thought, I'll probably never leave this place. What else can I do? I'm a fraud. I'm this guy with this BSc, but I'm doing internet stuff. And anyway, this opportunity came up to join Nike, and it just sounded so exciting. And there, all of a sudden, I was doing sales to people who sold Nike product online. So it wasn't all that similar to what I was doing, but I think to an external organization who doesn't have this sort of tech capability, at least in country, I was seen as this sort of technical expert, someone who's had exposure to selling online and things like that. And so I had lots of interesting exposure there. That later transformed into another role, which was called marketplace development, which has nothing to do with marketplaces that I would associate myself with now, but rather just the general marketplace. And worked with retailers to implement some really exciting sort of technology into the physical retail space and try and merge these worlds. So that I really enjoyed. It was really, really exciting. And just as I was, I think, getting comfortable again, I then, in fact, I think I popped by just to say hi at the Biddelby offices, and Jaco Jonker, who was the then CEO, said, would you be interested in exploring this? And I actually thought he was joking. I thought this is absolutely mad, but absolutely, of course, so sign me up. And I sometimes think, that saying of fools go where angels fear to tread. I don't think I had a clue what I was getting myself into, but this opportunity to become a CEO was rather exciting, and I loved Biddelbai. When I left Biddelbai, it was definitely the sadness, and the same thing happened when I left Nike. I felt like, oh, my time's not really now, but this opportunity, it's time to move. So yes, after a few interviews and chats with a few people, I ended up in this spot, and next thing I'm this Biddelbai CEO. I'm a director of the company. I've got all this responsibility. Now it's not just looking at digital sales or one specific thing, but there's marketing, there's finance, there's tech responsibilities, and so yeah, that for me. I think it was probably post joining and realizing this weight and gravity was where I felt one of my really sort of heaviest moments of like, what have I actually just done? This is not, this is 60, 80 people's lives who all work in this company. It's the company's success. And at the time as well, I think one of the important pieces of the story when I joined Biddelbai for the second time was that we had four very senior people leaving, and they weren't just leaving the company, they were leaving the country. And so the previous CEO was stepping out, and that's who I was replacing. The operations manager was going, the marketing manager was going, and the chief technical officer was going. And if you're in a tech business, those people are all very, very key people. So we just had some stability in finance and HR essentially. So this whole brand new team, which I actually wasn't fully involved in with recruiting, I kind of inherited. So I got to meet my new CTO, I got to meet a new marketing manager, the operations manager I didn't know at the time, so that was some level of comfort for me. But I think there were some very real fears and worries, I think, how we're going to pull this all together. And to give you a straight answer with, how did you overcome this? It was one day at a time.
Yes.
It was really, building relationships with these people, and they turned out all to be wonderful, people. And so they were chosen with, with intent and care. And then we had to start making this Biddelbai, the new place that we were going to start building. So I think that's the whirlwind tour for getting to Biddelbai. I think there's definitely a lot more stories to go on post that, but I think that's maybe a good intro.
Yeah, and very interesting. And I wanted to speak to you a bit because I usually, with Risk and Rise, we've been speaking to a lot of intrapreneurs, and for me, you fit under the intrapreneur, so INTRA. So just for people that don't understand the difference, intrapreneurs start the business. So Andy Higgins is the intrapreneur. Him and John Clegg were behind actually creating Biddelbai from conception right through to where it is today. But I've always experienced and seen as an intrapreneur, you come up, and it sounds like from what you shared, so many of the projects, even when you went to Nike and that, was to do something different, unusual, very exciting. And it's about how do you bring that entrepreneurial spirit and thinking into a corporate, so into an existing business, in order to help it. So I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, but it has
been. It's an interesting thing because I've always I think been drawn to the idea of entrepreneurship, but I'm not a natural entrepreneur. I haven't started a business. I may have been instrumental in helping people, develop business and grow a business, but that hasn't been my story. And I don't think I've necessarily had this specific intent to be an entrepreneur, but I think being involved in work that is really exciting, I think it does naturally lend to you exploring things and trying new things. And I also think it does depend on the company and the time that it's involved in, and that presents opportunity in some cases. And I think in other businesses maybe there isn't as much space to do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the Bob Shop is definitely one of those spaces, because you breaking ground, you're doing interesting things. So in that then you said you just in terms of managing the transitions, because you've jumped, you've always seen something new, like when apps weren't a thing and Bidderbuy we're starting to bring in apps, you lean towards that. So that's why I say, for me, you've got that cutting edge, what's happening now, what's new, and how do we make it work and apply it kind of thinking about you at the. And you said there was some fear in all of these transitions.
Mm-hmm.
So although you managed it one day at a time, what did you mean by that? How is there anything you'd like? So maybe to ask a question another way is, if someone else was looking, in their corporate world, looking at changing roles, what advice would you give them on how to handle the risk of doing something different?
Yeah, I think
managing the fear.
Yeah, I would definitely say is that you have to be open to some level of risk, and I think as I've grown older and growing again to family, maybe some of that thinking would be slightly different. I'm not sure, but I think having a genuine interest in the area that you're looking to go into, and some capability, you've got what you need there, but you have to show up every day. You have to then have this posture or attitude of learning and being inquisitive and actually enjoying what you're doing, and then go for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that it's almost, so what was the fear about then, if there was fear?
I think it's just the unknown. I would say particularly early on, the fear was, I think, smaller. There was less responsibility. There was less gravity. If you make a mistake, if you didn't dream up the best feature for this app, will the world fall apart? It probably won't. When you're running a business or running big teams, and there's people and their livelihoods depending on it, yes, then there's a sense of gravity to the decisions. But you can only make these decisions as best as you can, and with thought and care. I think there's a big difference between risk and measuring that risk and being reckless. And so as long as you can say with certainty you have done everything in your power to be careful and considerate and thoughtful, at some point you just have to make that decision and go for it.
Yeah. I like that distinction between, I can't remember say, but not being reckless. So when we talk about taking risks, it's not about the recklessness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you mustn't interpret taking risk as being reckless, because I think there is a distinction between the two. And you can take risk, and it can be calculated risk, and you can fail, but you can also succeed. But I think the important piece would be to look back and say, sure, was I custodian of that company or that team? Did I make the right decisions? Even if we failed, that's also fine. It wasn't great, but at least we can say with certainty that we made decisions with care, and we did the best that we could in those circumstances.
So has there ever been a time where you failed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I think one of the interesting things about becoming a CEO at the time is that it's been a humbling experience. I think that's how I would probably characterize it. And I remember my predecessor said to me, you remember when you probably thought I would do it this way, I wouldn't do that. He said, well, now you've got the opportunity to do that for yourself, and other people can think that about you. And I think when I came in, I just come back from Nike with lots of energy and this successful brand. Coming back to Dubai, where this marketplace is not as selective as a Nike. The marketplace will sell anything as long as it's legal, and so there was a very different approach now. There's no massive prestige behind you. It's actually, you've got to get down and get working and make make your business happen. And I came in thinking, wow, there's all these things that need to change. And you change them, and you think this one is going to be the one that's going to turn this marketplace around. And just to give you some context, when I just rejoined, there had been a big fee change, I guess 6 months to a year before I had joined, and it seems like we had lost some of the sellers who were selling on the platform. So they weren't happy with the platform, and as a result, the actual GMV was suffering. It was in decline, even though the bottom line was still looking okay. There were some issues with the platform, and so we needed to now get more merchants back, get more customers back, buyers back to the platform, so that we can start filling in the top lines. And so there definitely were challenges. And so I thought, no, we're going to fix all these things, and we'll do this and this and this. And time after time again, realizing that didn't work. That didn't make this big effect that we did. And I think over time, that's kind of changed my view with how to approach expectations, and realizing in some cases, you need to make a lot of small iterations or small improvements that collectively have an impact. And sure, there might be one or two things that you change, and we've changed some massive things now post merger for the transition from Dubai to Bobshop. But in general, there hasn't been this one big thing that just flips a switch and you've turned a business around. And there will be some of those things, but what I've realized is, don't put all your hopes into this one thing, because you'll realize you actually didn't know as much as what you thought you may have known at the time. And so that's the humbling experience, but there's also some learning from that. And it helps refine your thinking for the next time you make a mistake, and the next time, and the next time, until collectively you've actually made a meaningful change.
So how do you view mistakes then now? Is it just as iterations, as you use that word?
Yeah, I think, in some cases, it was someone who quoted this to me, was saying how, your mountaintops are for reflection and celebration. So, when you're at the top, you have time to reflect on what you've done, celebrate your success. But it's the valleys that you go into, that's where the real learning happens. That's where you've got to, have a bit of grit and use it as an opportunity to learn. And so, when I say mistakes, it might also just be not necessarily a mistake. It could be a failure. You had this expectation that this thing was going to do this, but it didn't do that. It did something else. And we can actually learn from that and realize, wow, there were actually pieces of this that we got right. Have made this, a bunch of sellers unhappy because of this decision, but overall we actually have improved things for everyone. It didn't do what we thought it was going to do, but we can now use that for the next time we're going to make a change. And so, I definitely don't think you should be afraid of the mistakes, because as I've realized, they will come. They'll come, freely to you. But you should be using them as opportunities to learn what not to do, or learn what to change, or what to do when you get those successes again.
So let's ask a bit about organizational culture, because you head up this corporate environment. You have, as you said, a lot of responsibilities. And you've got a big team that needs to all be working together. So how do you encourage, or do you encourage, like, a culture of innovation within?
Yeah,
in the
I think
environment?
definitely that's been, I think, one of the challenges that I've often struggled with is, to make a place that people feel secure enough to come to you with ideas. And I really felt, particularly early on, I think we're getting better and better at it now, but particularly early on, I often felt like if I said something, everyone would say yes and they would do it, irrespective of how they felt about it. And I really struggled with that, coming out of my previous employer where I wasn't the CEO, I wasn't the head of this big team. And so I had a lot of other opinions. And I found that these other opinions, even the dissenting opinions and the ones that do agree with you, to have that good counsel is actually so important. And that's just as important in creating the space for employees to feel like they can try things, or at least come up with ideas. And that's tricky, because I think it's not just good enough to say, yes, we're very entrepreneurial as a company. We have to be, and that is true, I think, in our case, just because of the nature of what we do and the competition and the types of people that we serve. But it's not enough to just say that. I think you have to actively encourage staff to come with the ideas, even if you do ultimately not go with it. At least that would have resulted in some good conversation and understanding. Did you consider this? Yes, let's try this, or let's not do this. But at least then we've innovated in some way, irrespective of whether we roll out that feature. So yes, absolutely important. I think for me, I've personally felt it more difficult than I expected to encourage that, for sure.
So what is your view then on staff actually making mistakes or taking a risk? I hear you encouraging them to come up with the ideas, but when the idea then fails, how do you
Yeah.
approach that in order to create that bigger kind of culture of?
Yeah. So, we've definitely had lots of initiatives where we would try something and it doesn't have the outcome. And I mean, I'm the first to say I've done this many times, particularly in the product space where we dream up this new feature, oh, this is going to change it, and it just doesn't do that. We've had many other initiatives where staff have had that freedom to, it might be a big campaign or something that we do, and it doesn't have the effect. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that's the space where you want employees to feel safe and say, "Oh, it's disappointing. We didn't get what we achieved, or there were some elements that were good, but here's things that we should try and tweak for next time." I think what we definitely don't want to encourage is where people are being reckless, particularly when it could mean a merchant, a seller might rely on this thing that you are working on. And so you have to really take care and consider what you're doing before it does have an impact on other people. And we've made, I think, particularly in the last year, we've made some very serious changes on our platform. And so, like, one of these things is we felt very strongly that if Bob Shop were to remain relevant and survive, is that we would need to reform how shipping happens on the platform. And so we wanted to introduce some standardized shipping pricing for buyers, so that when buyers come to this Bob Shop, they see, oh wow, it's 30 Rand for almost anything. And so it's very easy for them to understand. And so our thinking around that is that we are making this change, as it's quite a radical change, because prior to this, and maybe it's actually something I've left out, prior to this is that we allowed merchants to set, or sellers to set, their own shipping arrangements. And so seller A may charge 50 Rand for shipping, and they might use the postal service, but seller B might, charge 200 Rand, and they might use the same service. And so there was just no standard. And so we felt the way to serve our sellers best would be to attract more buyers. And to do that, we wanted to create the standardized shipping arrangement. But what that did at the same time is that it caused many sellers to have to change their approach, because now they also were responsible for some of the funding behind the shipping. And so it took a lot of communication and debate and arguments with many different sellers in different spaces and industries to come on board with this. Please don't drop us. We had many sellers saying, "Oh, we're done with you. You're going to close in 2 years," and that sort of thing. And it's really tough to hear, because you actually do care about these people. But we made these changes, and over time, we then saw, wow, this is actually having the desired effect. It was one of those moments where we can say, wow, it wasn't the silver bullets. It didn't change everything overnight, but it definitely has had this positive impact. And we can see overall, most of the merchants who've stuck with it and embraced it are seeing really healthy growth now. And so that was exactly an instance where there was this really good innovation. It wasn't thought about overnight, though. It was more than a year and a bit in making, but it paid off over time. And so that's the type of intrapreneurialship or innovation that we want people to think of these things. And along the way, we discovered, we didn't think about this, and that was where we would make tweaks to what, we had this very narrow view of what we would be offering, and turns out, okay, we have to make a concession. Yeah, we have to do this based on the feedback from sellers and our staff as well, who deal with these sellers all day. And so, yeah, definitely this distinction. You want to encourage it, not reckless, but a well thought out innovation.
Yeah, so part of that, I suppose, is you leading by example, as you said, and asking for ideas, and then how you receive them. And when something does go wrong, it's the staff watching how you react to that. And if you having this approach, it's just an iteration. We just need to tweak something. Yeah, it's disappointing. It didn't work out the way we expected, but it's still something, and we can, or it didn't work, but that's a learning. So let's go back to or try something else.
Absolutely. And even, something as simple as there was something that we had done in the early days of Budabai, and this was far before I was, you were probably involved at that time, and Andy was involved, and it was Andy who brought up, he said, at one point we auctioned a car, it was really successful, why didn't we try it? And I thought, a car, like how complicated is this going to be? And in reality, and so this is not necessarily some sort of new innovation, but for all of us here, we had never done anything like this, or the current staff. And so, we tried it, and it turned out to be such a simple exercise. It, in terms of the administration and dealing with the dealership, it was actually far easier than I thought it would be. But the impact that it had from a customer point of view, people were like, what, a R1 car? This is absolutely crazy. And the auction went well, and it sold for a good price, and it was just an overall positive experience. And so it's these things, take learnings, things that you remember were good, and use them, and innovate where possible, and reuse the things that worked 20 years ago. They might still be relevant now as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe just for transparency, for those that don't know my background, I was Budabai's in the early days first employee. So that's my I've thankfully been involved in a few startups. Not that I came up with the idea, but being there from the ground up. And we used to do those R1 no reserve auctions. Yeah, and we put all sorts of things on auction for literally starting at R1, small increments, obviously depending on the value of it. And what's interesting is always the auctions went for close to market value, if not more.
Yeah.
So I find that quite interesting that Andy then suggests you do that years later, and it still had the same effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's for me is a great example of, I think when we first did it, I can't even remember how the idea came up I'll have to ask Andy. I'm hoping to get him on the show in the future. But that's became a calculated risk. I mean, there could be that something happens on that day and the car goes for way less than its value.
Absolutely.
But it seems reckless, but I think from the understanding behind it and understanding the market and how auctions work, there was enough understanding there that it wasn't a reckless risk. It was a risk, but worth taking because of all the benefits that come from it.
Absolutely. And, that's, I think, the bit which really struck me at the end is the benefit was immense. We spent a month talking about this car that's going to go for R1. And so people who hadn't experienced Bidawai or Bob Shop now, they got them to talk. I mean, this is totally crazy. What happens if it does go for R1? And so people were talking about, the platform for a month, and we ran a competition. You can guess what the car is going to go for. And so people were participating in a competition, and then there was the actual auction, and, some people were just watching it. I heard the company who we dealt with, they were all sitting in their boardroom just watching this auction of this car that we've negotiated with them. And so even for them, it was exciting. And I remember hearing from the person who actually won the vehicle at the end. She said her heart was just racing because every time she bid, then someone else outbid her and made her so upset. And then she eventually won it, and it was just such an overall positive experience. And I think even the people who didn't win the vehicle, it was a fun experience too. And so this just had overwhelming positive association for us as a business, and to draw people to the platform where we have these sellers who are selling things. Because for people who don't know, is that a platform like Bob Shop, we do not own the things that are on the platform. So our business is providing the platform for other, mostly South Africans, to sell their products to other people in the country. And so that for us was just so immensely exciting and beneficial. Even if you are selling collectibles, someone may have come and seen your product because they stumbled across a Suzuki on auction, for this one campaign. And so that was just it's a small example. It's a point in time, but nonetheless, a super positive, I think, outcome of some sort of risk that we had to take to do this and make this happen.
Well, I'm also highlighting in Risk and Rise resources for intrapreneurs, for startups, because the whole point of the show is to encourage more people to start something, whether it's a business or to start writing that book and publish it or get out there. And so from my knowledge of Bob Shop, having been involved in, the really, really early days, but always just watching it. And I actually use it. I sell some of my art on there. But I wanted to just ask you, like, how you see Bob Shop, or if you can maybe explain a bit about how just briefly, how it moved from Bidawai to Bob Shop. But also I know there's some, like, I call them sister organizations. There's Bob Go and all this. But explain the shift, but also how intrapreneurs could use it, because it's a very useful resource. I have my ideas that I always tell people about, but
So I actually think that transition from Bidawai to Bob Shop or to Bob Group as a company, that is actually a very important point. I'm trying to remember the year now, but at some point I remember, we were trying all the things that we could do within our power to improve this platform, and it just didn't feel like enough. The shareholders that we've had have been incredibly supportive, and so there was no massive pressure to necessarily change anything immediately. They were incredibly supportive. If we needed to raise funds, they were there. But we had this growing sense that we just weren't making the progress that we needed to. There's so much competition, particularly in the marketplace space now in South Africa. And at some point there was a conversation between Andy, the shareholders, and myself as well, where we realized, wow, we've got this wonderful company called Africa who does shipping. And they do order fulfillment, and they aggregate courier providers to enable merchants to ship things from A to B. We've got this marketplace, got lots of customers, but we've got no shipping. And it was like a no-brainer, actually. And so by the time Andy came, and I think he was very very caring and respectful, because this is quite a big change for me at that point, is that you're not going to be the CEO of this company anymore. Your responsibilities are not actually changing, but you're not going to be the same. It's not the same company anymore. And but when we spoke about it, it just made so much sense, and so the shipping that I spoke about now is actually a result of this Bill or Buy company merging and with this Africa becoming Bob Group, and now we can offer better shipping services to our sellers. And so, I think just to get back onto point is that if anyone wants to sell products in the online space, I think there's a few ways you can go about it. You can use your local WhatsApp group. You can use Facebook. You could start your own website, and they all have pros and cons. There's security issues with some, or you can also make use of a marketplace. And now that's one of that's where we come into play. And the reason why I think it's a really, really good option, and it doesn't have to be your only option, is that you just need a product, and you need to be able to describe it, and you can list it for sale. And so you've got a seller page that you can refer people to. You can send links directly to the platform. We will handle the payments. We will handle the shipping. So we've integrated with all these providers so that you don't have to do all that. If you get to the point where you're a little bit more serious, you may have a website even, and you want to use a marketplace as an additional channel. We've also worked on ways to help integrate, make sure your inventory stays in sync, so that if you sell something on your site, it doesn't double list the product, on the marketplace. And so we have this area where we can then sync products from your website onto our platform as well. And so it's a lovely way to get exposure to more customers, because we do generate a lot of traffic, so that you can sell to your customers, but you can also sell to the customers that come to the marketplace. And so the real nice thing about it is that there is zero cost, upfront cost. And so it's only when you actually make that successful sale that we take a commission. We call it a success fee. And so we've managed your payment. We will help you ship the item. We'll charge you some fees for it, and you send the product off. And so it's a lovely way to do some business, get exposure to additional customers. And so, we have a dedicated team who help onboard new people, particularly if you have a website. If you have a website, you can go to bobshop.co.za/sell, and we have all the information there. But we also have a team who run regular, we call them meetups. And so if you look in our footer on our website, there's a link. And if there are any meetups coming up, you can sign up, and you can then have a slightly more intimate online session where you can learn a little bit about selling on the platform. But then, of course, Bob Group is bigger than just Bob Shop. And, that's always my favorite bit to talk about Bob Shop. But our more recent success, I would say, and a reason for some of our successes is because of Bob Go, the old uafrica.com. And Bob Go is the service that can help aggregate couriers. So I've got a parcel that I need to ship from, let's say, Johannesburg to Cape Town. BobGo service will then get quotes from all the different couriers based on the addresses that you put in and present them to you as a merchant. And you can select the one that you want. You go for the fastest one, the cheapest one, etc. And it really does, it's really a superpower as an online seller or merchant to be able to have this flexibility. And so if you have your own website, head over to BobGo. Sign up. There's a free trial. There's even a free tier, so you don't have to have upfront costs, and then you just pay for shipments. We then also have Bob Pay, which is a service to help facilitate payments on your website. And one of the more exciting newer projects is Bob Box, where we are trying to roll out lockers across the country. And so instead of getting your parcel delivered to a customer's door, they can get it delivered to a Bob Box locker location near them. So perhaps it's on the way to work or the way home. You type in a PIN and this magic door opens and there's your product. It's a really cool experience. It's so much fun to retrieve a parcel. And then last but not least, we also have a service called ShipLogic. So if you have a courier, you can sign up to use that software and run your business, including accounting, driver apps, etc. And so I think that the bit that's really exciting for me is that we are now encompassing everything e-commerce, whereas before I would just be talking about the marketplace and this is what you can do. But sometimes the marketplace might not be for you. It might be for, you might want to run your own website, but you need shipping or you need payments. And so I really believe we can offer something that's suitable for more people. And that for me is really exciting. I think the bit that kind of gets me out of bed every morning is the fact that we are doing work here that is really beneficial, not only for us, but for the people that use the platforms. I think that's just so cool and honorable that you can actually make a difference in other people's lives as well at the same time.
Yeah, and it really has become this whole e-commerce online system. I don't know.
Yes.
All these different aspects. So
yeah,
it's very exciting to see it evolve into Bob Group.
Absolutely.
And just then to highlight the point for startups, because I'm really excited about that. I want to help people overcome that fear of failure of starting.
Mm-hmm.
But you do not need any money to have an online presence if you've got, especially with a product. You list your product on Bob Shop, and your seller's page becomes your website or your catalog. So on your business card, you can, your footer of your email, you can put your seller's page as your website. And then as you grow, as you said, you add on a Shopify store or WooCommerce or whatever it is, which integrates fully with all of these systems. Yeah. So yes, there's no excuse, say you don't have money for a website.
Yes, and even, like I need to ship something, you can sign up. You don't have to fill out massive forms with multiple couriers. You can just sign up and send a test shipment, give it a shot. There's just, I think the nice thing is that there's just this really low barrier, no barrier actually, to kind of getting started. You need an internet connection and you need something to sell, and that can be a start, and you can grow from there. It really can be a start, and it can also be a boost, an additional channel to what you already have. So yeah, we love what we do.
Absolutely. So if people want to find out more about that, it's just bobshop.co.za.
Yes,
the right place.
For the marketplace, BobGo for shipping, Bob Pay for payments, and Bob Box for the lockers. So and if you can't remember all that, go to bob.co.za, and we have links to all the other services that we offer. But please do.
You just reminded me there, just a point to highlight for those startup people. It's a great way to also accept credit card payments without a credit card machine is to use Bob Pay. If you're using your payment system through Bob Group, you don't have to go and get a little credit card machine or anything. You can accept credit cards online right now, and then you just pay the commission per sale. There's no upfront costs.
And even on the, just to highlight on the marketplace, is that we have pretty much every major payment method integrated with the platform. So if it needs to be Zapper, or I need a scan to pay, or it's an EFT or credit card, it's all done, and you don't have to worry about that at all. And I think that's one of the scary bits, is signing up for all these services, integrating it with your platform and website, etc. And so use the work that's been done for you to start, and then go from there.
Great. How can people get hold of you if they want to ask you more?
Probably best to search for me on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best place. Craig Lubbe is my name, and just search for me on LinkedIn, and or reach out to me on one of the barb shop selling communities, and we can definitely get chatting.
Great. I'll have the link in the show notes to what we've spoken about. Great. So then, just as we come to the end, can I ask you a couple of rapid fire questions just for some fun? And then what comes to mind when I say failure?
Sure. Trying again.
What is your secret weapon for bouncing back from a setback?
I think positivity.
What's the most important lesson you've learned as an intrapreneur?
I think that you will probably fail more than you think you will, and it will be okay.
Cool. And what's the best advice that you've ever received?
Sure, that's a tricky one. I really like the quotes, about peaks are for reflection, and the trenches are for learning. So I really like that, because it gives hope in the trenches. At least if I'm failing, I can learn. But if I'm at the peak, it's just time to reflect.
And I know you mentioned it before, but I wonder if it is still your answer. What inspires you to get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, it's my family, my wife, my children, but then also the work we get to do every day. Every day, there's something new. There's a new problem. There's a new person to help. And so, I think there's a combination of things, but, both personal, but also professionally, just the people that we help is really a good reason to get out of bed every day.
Yeah. So then just your last parting thought then, do you have any advice to anyone that is struggling with the fear of failure, hesitating to take a leap into starting, hopefully an online business, because that's your area, but starting something? What would be your parting bit of advice for them?
Yeah, I think my biggest point of advice would be to just try something. Don't sit back and wonder what it would be like if I had done it, because I think that will be disappointing. Rather, just do something, even if it's a small step in the right direction. That act of doing that little thing every day will eventually turn into something. And I've seen it in our merchants who use the platform. I've seen it in friends and family that I know, people who just get started, even if you haven't worked it all out. Those are the people who make progress and fail, but also thrive as well. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Savannah. Lovely to chat to you again.
This has been Risk and Rise with me, Talana Simpson. I hope this has inspired you, if not just to go and have a look at the Bob Group and what they do, but also to maybe start something. You do not need anything other than access to the internet to get an e-commerce business off the ground nowadays. So do check them out. And also, please do find the show, Risk and Rise, on your favorite podcast app. And please, will you give the show a rating? It really does help us to reach more people. And that way we can hopefully help more startups get going, get off the ground, and make a difference in this world. And that way we are risking and rising together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining me on Risk and Rise, where we face fears, conquer challenges, and rise above adversity to achieve our dreams. Find out more at riskandrise.co.za.